I just learned the story of a man I want to tell you about. His name was Ignaz Semmelweis. He was a Hungarian obstetrician in the 1840s, and he's having a bit of a heyday right now because he was the first person to realize that it was important for doctors to wash their hands. See, he was a med student at Vienna Hospital in 1844, and one of the ways that med students learned then, as I think they still do now, was to explore the human body through autopsies while they were doing their rotation. He was in obstetrics, so he would shuttle back and forth between the operating theater where the autopsies happened and the delivery room where he would deliver babies. And it was a risky thing to have a baby back in those days. Women of any means at all had their baby at home. It was only those women who had no one to attend to them who had their baby in the hospital, and 30% of them died. See, there was a disease called childbed fever that they couldn't explain, but that struck indiscriminately. The women would have her baby and everything would seem okay, but a few hours later, she would come down with a fever that would swiftly devolve into convulsions, and then she would die. Semmelweis was haunted by these women. All these deaths he couldn't explain and couldn't prevent. He became driven to figure out what was going wrong. He did research and realized that women whose babies were delivered by midwives had a much better chance at survival, but he wasn't sure why. He finally realized what was happening, not by looking at the data, but when his own mentor died, because a student nicked his finger while they were performing an autopsy together. And he realized that his mentor died in much the same way as a woman with childbed fever died, only he had a name for his mentor's death: toxemia. Semmelweis realized that every morning he would have his hands deep in a cadaver, and then he would go deliver a baby with those same hands. Now, he didn't know about bacteria. He didn't understand viruses, but he did know that there was something, some kind of particles on his hands that led to a deadly infection. Semmelweis realized that he had inadvertently killed countless women. He was, as the reporter who I heard tell this story said, carrying death to the place where life begins. Semmelweis was devastated when he figured this out. So he developed a way to wash and disinfect his hands, essentially by washing them and rinsing them with a bleach solution. He didn't know exactly why, but he knew that hand washing was key to saving lives. The problem was, beyond his clinic, people didn't believe him. They didn't want to change the way they did things. They had lots of questions he couldn't answer. They wanted to know why washing your hands worked. Why did it work sometimes, but not every time? Had he ever seen these particles? How could he know they were there? Semmelweis wrote letter after letter to his colleagues, urging them to adopt his life-saving practice, but for the most part, they didn't. If they had, think how many lives could have been saved in the years between his work and Louis Pasteur's discovery of germ theory. Who do we listen to? What do we have to see to believe? How do we know what's true? How do we weigh competing truth claims and assimilate new information that completely changes our understanding of the world? We have access to more news and information faster than any other humans in history. But it's harder than ever to know which sources to trust. We're living in an age of doubt, a golden age for conspiracy theories. I mean, people have been attacking cell phone towers, desperate for some explanation for the rapid spread of this virus. Too many look for certainty in the wrong places. Too many dismiss science completely. We can't see it. We don't believe it. We feel just fine. Thomas, in our story this morning, knows a little something about doubt. The poor guy's been the poster kid for doubt for centuries. But history has been too hard on Thomas. Sure, he was dubious about the disciples' claims of resurrection. After all, death is inevitable. The dead stay dead. Thomas wasn't alone. When they'd heard the women's claims of an empty tomb that morning, the other disciples were skeptical too. Why else would they have hidden away behind closed doors? Their leader was dead, killed by the state. They were afraid they were going to be next. But then Jesus came and stood among them, speaking words of peace. Locked doors couldn't keep him out. And somehow, the one who was dead was alive again, and they were overcome with joy. The one they'd betrayed and denied and abandoned greeted them as friends. And the work they thought had been over was really only just beginning. Now, I don't understand how it worked. The center of our faith is a mystery. But I do trust that as they were hidden away, closed off from the rest of the world, scared and worried about what the coming days would bring, Christ came and was present among them. He calmed their fear with words of peace. He shared the power of the Holy Spirit, and he charged them to continue his life-saving work, to reconcile and make new, to share the good news of God's grace with all people. But Thomas missed it. Who can blame him for wanting some confirmation, just to see, just to hear, just to touch, to know for certain that Christ, the one who was crucified, is risen? I wonder if Thomas was brimming with doubt and disappointment when Christ showed up to him a week later. But Jesus didn't scold him. This tells me that doubt is normal, and questions are how we build a durable faith. God can handle our doubt. See, in Christ, God draws near to us and risks the pain of vulnerability, showing us his wounds, that we might know the truth that we are loved and we are forgiven. Then, God charges us to share that news, that love and forgiveness with the world. I don't know about you, but this story really resonates with me right now. I can suddenly identify with the disciples hidden away from the rest of the world, shut off from their community, grief-stricken, longing for a glimmer of hope. These days of isolation and anxiety inevitably take a toll on us, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically. But friends, we may be apart, but we are not alone. We're in this together. I wonder, who has reached out to you in this time of social distancing and offered you a lifeline? To whom might you reach out? How might we be more like Christ, vulnerable and honest about who we are and how we are, and listening as others do the same? I hope this afternoon or in the days ahead, you'll pick up the phone and make a call to someone you think might need to hear from you. Ask how they're doing and really listen. Be present to them as they respond. It seems like a small thing, I know, but it could be a way that together we live into our hope for the future, for our community, for this congregation of God's people. You know, we can't see a relationship. Our ties to one another are invisible. We can't see grace any more than we can see the germs on our hands or the virus on a doorknob. I can't see it, but I do believe it, because I have experienced grace and the love of God in and through each and every one of you. I don't have to see it to know that it's real, to trust that even in this time of death, with makeshift morgues outside of hospitals, this time of fear and worry and doubt, God is at work in and through us, meeting us in our grief and fear and worry and doubt, offering peace, calling us to life-giving relationship with one another. Thanks be to God.